Hi everyone, my name is Kate and it's half of November, which means it's time to get ready for Christmas! As you can see, I've already decorated my house and I can start feeling the Christmas spirit. And let me know in the comments when you decorate your house, like right before Christmas or like me in the middle of November. And of course, what a cozy winter evening without a cozy and warm clothes. And today I want to show you how to knit a vest with bear. I don't know how about you, but for me, teddy bear, red color is completely associated with Christmas and New Year, so I decided to knit a red vest with bear. This vest is knitted from wool, so it keeps you very warm. Those who don't know how to knit with needles, don't worry, I try to show and tell in as much detail as possible how to knit such a vest. Since the yarn I used is bulky, I knitted this vest in a few days. By the way, if you don't like teddy bear, you can find any pixel one-colored picture on Pinterest and use it. You can find the pattern on my teddy bear in the description under the video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, it helps my channel to grow, especially I know that most of you watch my channel without subscribing, so subscribe right now and let's get started. We will need a little bit more than 7 skeins of red yarn. I have Snowstorm from Hobby, it's 100% wool in 50 grams 50 meters and less than 1 skein of grey yarn. 8mm round needles. You can use usual, but round will be more convenient. Scissors, needle, markers, tape measure and hook 6mm, but it's optionally, not necessarily. Leave about 160 cm tip from end of the yarn and place the yarn in your hand like this. Put the needle on top of the tension, then put it under your thumb, then under your index finger and into the loop under your thumb. And tighten. We have 2 loops on the needles. From now we're gonna make 1 loop at a time. Again, take the thread under the thumb, then under the index finger and into the loop under the thumb. Tighten. And repeat again. Under the thumb, under the index finger and loop under the thumb. Tighten. And like this we need to cast on 50 loops. I have 50 loops on my needles. Take the needle with the loops in my left hand and the tip that is left put aside and don't accidentally knit it. Moving our loops closer to the end of the needle, and now we're gonna knit the band. And we always take the first loop off on the other right needle, absolutely always behind the front wall of the loop. Next we'll start alternating between front and purl stitches. We'll start with the front. The loop has front wall and back wall. In the first row we're gonna knit all loops behind the front wall. So insert the needle behind the front wall of the loop and look how I hold the thread in my left hand. And I use my middle finger to put the thread on the needle and then pull it out of the loop to the right needle. It was a front stitch. Next is purl. We have to throw the yarn in front of the needle and insert the needle behind the front wall but from above. Grab the yarn and pull it out of the loop into the right needle. It was a purl stitch and next one again front stitch. Insert the needle through the front wall of the loop, grab the yarn and pull it to the right needle. Next stitch is purl. Throw the yarn in front of the needle, insert the needle behind the front wall, grab the yarn and bring it out to the right needle. Sometimes I move the loops to the edge of the needle. And next stitch is again front stitch. Insert the needle through the front wall, grab the yarn and pull it to the right needle. Next stitch is again purl. Throw the yarn in front of the needle, insert the needle behind the front wall and grab the yarn and bring it out to the right needle. And so we knit like this until the end of the row, alternating between front stitch and purl stitch. If you need to understand what the next stitch should be, purl or front, you should look at the stitches already knitted on your right needle. The purl stitches have a horizontal line like this, and the front stitches look like a letter V, have a shape of V. So if the last stitch is like a V, then the next stitch must be purl stitch and vice versa. So knit like this until the end of the row. At the very end of the row, the penultimate loop must be a purl stitch, and the last loop is always purl stitch, no matter if the stitch in front of it was purl or front one. This is what we have, and now turn your work. The first loop is always just taking off on the right needle without knitting, and starting from the second row we will knit the front stitch by the back wall of the loop and the purl stitch by the front wall of the loop, so it will be even more convenient. So if the penultimate stitch in the previous row was the purl, then the second loop in the next row should be front. The next stitch is purl, so we throw the yarn in front of the needle, grab the yarn and pull it to the right needle. The next is front, then the next is again purl, and so on until the end of the row, alternating front and purl stitches. At the very end, the penultimate stitch should be purl stitch, and the last loop always purl stitch, always. Turn your work and start the same thing. The first loop is simply taken off on the right needle, always, and then start knitting again, front stitch and purl stitch, and so on until the end of the row. In this way we knit a rubber band. You can knit as many rows as you like. I will knit 9 rows. If you suddenly drop a loop from the needle, you need to take the previous loop and thread it from the back. This is if it was a front stitch in the shape of V. If it was a purl stitch, we need to thread the yarn into the loop from the front and put it back on the needle. How we count rows? I count by this V. One V is one row. I've made 9 rows of a band. Let's count. And after the band, it will be easier to knit. The width of my band is 6.5 centimeters. Next row we need only front stitches. The first loop is just taken off on the right needle and then knit front stitch through the back wall and then through the front wall. Again through the back wall and then through the front wall. Until the end of the work, we will alternate a row with front stitches and row with purl stitches. And we need to knit 17 rows up, alternating front stitches row and purl stitches row. The penultimate stitch in this row is front stitch, and the last stitch in this row is purl stitch, always purl stitch. Turn your work. This row will be made up completely of purl stitches, so the first loop we just take off on the right needle, then throw the yarn in front of the needle, and make a purl stitch. Knit like this until the end of the row, and the last stitch should be always purl stitch. Turn your work, and this row is completely of front stitches, so just take off the first loop on the right needle and then knit with only front stitches, and the last loop should be purl stitch. So knit like this at all 17 rows up, and I start counting rows after the last horizontal line on the rubber band. When I run out of skein, I make a knot around one end and around the other end I also make a knot. Then pull them off, cut the ends and continue knitting. I marked with markers the two middle loops of my works and the beginning and end of the pattern. The pattern consists of 22 loops. We will read the pattern alternately from right to left, then from left to right. Where there are numbers on the sides is the beginning of each row. I have this marker on two middle loops. There are 11 loops on the right side, and I have the marker on 11th loop and 11 loops on the other side. So total with markers are 22 loops. So I start knitting as usual till the marker. Starting from the marker, look at the first row on the pattern. We need to knit 5 red loops. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then I take gray yarn, leave a longer tip, and knit 2 loops in gray. The first, a little bit pull the end, and the second one. Then I leave gray yarn and take the red yarn and knit 8 red loops. It's important not to pull the red yarn too much after the gray. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Then we need to knit 2 gray loops again. We take gray color and knit the first loop. And at the back we have a brooch and we need to pull it out so it doesn't constrict the pattern. It should be loose. Stretch the loops and see that the gray yarn doesn't constrict the pattern, and knit the second loop. And then we have left 5 red loops. Again, take red yarn and knit 5 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that is what we have. Then knit as usual until the end of the row. Turn your work and knit until the marker again. I reach the marker and the second row of the pattern reads from left to right, and we need to knit 4 red loops. I take gray yarn and it has to be under the red yarn, and we take the red one to the side like this, so that there is no hole. Make 1 gray purl stitch Then we take red one and knit 2 loops. Then we take gray one again, and it doesn't matter how, and knit 1 loop. Then we take red one and knit 6 loops. Take gray yarn and knit 1 loop. We form a brooch again. Stretch the loops and make sure that the brooch is loose and doesn't constrict your work. Then knit 2 red one. One loop in gray and then red until the end of the row. Turn your work and again knit to the pattern. I'll show you again on what principle to knit the pattern. There is nothing complicated, the main thing is to leave the brooches loose so they don't constrict the work. Okay, the third row we read from right to left and we need to knit 3 red loops, then gray one, and we take gray yarn like this. Then make 4 red loops. Then take gray yarn and knit 1 loop first. Then adjust the brooch so that it's loose. And knit follow the pattern. So we knit the same way the whole pattern up. Remember that the main thing is to make the brooches loose so that they don't tighten the work. And I'll show you again how we knit on the wrong side. Red yarn should be on top of the gray. Then we take it on the side, knit 1 gray loop, and then pull the red yarn. And knit following the pattern. This is how the full pattern on the front part looks like. The loops on the string are the last row of the pattern, and on the wrong side like this. All the brooches are loose and there is nothing constricting the pattern. And now you can cut the gray yarn. Counting the rows after the bend, we have 39 rows, and from the 40th row we will start to make decreases. Take off the first loop, and with the next 3 we have to make a decrease. I put the needle right by 3 loops through the front wall and make 1 loop. I grab the yarn and pull it to the right needle, like this. We have decrease with a rightward slope, and at the very end we need to make decrease with leftward slope. So knit until we have left 4 loops on the left needle. I have left 4 loops on my left needle, and to make a left slanting decrease we need to rearrange the loops. I take off 3 loops by the front wall on the right needle like this. Then I put them back on the left needle but by the back wall like this. Then I throw the yarn forwards of the needle, and we need to insert the needle by the back 3 walls like this. It will be a little bit difficult, but you can do it. Grab the yarn and bring it out to the right needle, like this. And the last loop is purl stitch as usual. Turn your work, and now you can see that we have decreased with a leftward slope. Row 41 we knit as usual without any decreases, just front stitches until the end of the row, and the last stitch as usual is purl stitch. Rows 42 and 43 knit repeating rows 40 and 41. Row 42 with decreases and row 43 without decreases. In the next frame you will see a different pattern on the bear which I initially didn't like, and then I reknitted to this bear. I've done 43 rows, and now we're going to make decreases in the middle of the vest too. I've marked the middle loops with marker. This is where we'll start make V-line. Take off the first loop to the right needle and then make decrease through the front walls of 3 loops, like this. Then knit as usual until the marker, but we should have left 2 loops until the marker. So here is my marker, and I have left 2 loops before it. Now we need to make leftward decrease, so I take off 2 loops on the right needle and then put them back on the left needle by the back wall, and insert the needle into the back walls and make a decrease, like this. Turn your work, and now we're gonna knit only one part of the vest. 45 rows we're gonna crochet without any decreases, but here we knit the first loop instead of removing it to the right needle. This row we again knit with decreases. The first decrease is behind the front wall of 3 loops, and then knit as usual, but you should have left 2 loops. So I have left 2 loops on this part, then I rearrange them. And make decrease by the back wall. Turn your work, and don't forget to knit the first loop. And then knit as usual until the end of the row. Row 48 make with decreases as we did before. Row 49 without decreases and knit the first loop. Starting from row 50, we will not do any decreases from the side, only at the neckline. So row 50, we start as usual with purl stitches without any decreases and knit until we have left 2 loops. And make a leftward decrease as we did before. Row 51, knit the first loop, and then as usual without decreases. Row 52, make decrease on the neckline. Row 53, knit the first loop and then knit without decreases. Row 54 is the last row with decrease on the neckline. After all decreases, we should have 9 loops left on the needle, and we need to knit another 14 rows up without any decreases. The total number of rows should be 67 rows. The first loop on the front side knit at the front stitch. The last loop is purl, then turn your work, take off the first loop on the right needle, and then knit. With purl stitches, the last loop is also purl. Turn your work and knit the first loop as a front stitch. So knit until you have 67 rows. I've done 67 rows and at 68 we'll be closing the knitting. Take the first loop off on the right needle and then make purl stitch. Grab the first loop and pull it through the second loop like this. We should have 1 loop left on the needle, then knit the purl stitch again and pull the first loop through the second loop again. And knit like this until the end of the row. Cut the yarn, pull it through the loop and tighten. We have knitted one side of the vest and the other side will be knitted in the same way. Turn your work on the wrong side, take the yarn and make decrease with 2 first loops by the front wall like this. Then knit as usual with purl stitches until we have left 4 loops. Make leftward slope decrease, rearrange the loops and make the decrease on the back wall. Like this. And the last loop is purl stitch. Turn your work. Take off the first loop on the right needle and then knit as usual with front stitches. The last loop on this side knit as front stitch. Turn your work and with 2 first loops make decrease by front wall. Then knit as usual with purl stitches until we have left 4 loops. Rearrange 3 loops and make leftward slope decrease. Turn your work and knit as usual, but the last loop knit as front stitch. Turn your work, make with first 2 loops decrease by the front wall. Then knit as usual with purl stitches until we have left 4 loops. Then rearrange 3 loops and make leftward slope decrease. Starting from row 49, we will not make decreases from the side, but we will continue to make them on the neckline. So knit as usual without decreases and the last loop make as front stitch. Row 50, make decrease with first 2 loops by the front wall and then knit as usual until the end of the row. Row 51, knit as usual without decreases and the last loop as front stitch 2. Row 52, make decrease only with the first 2 loops, and then knit as usual. Row 53, without decreases and the last loop knit as front stitch. Row 54, the last row with decrease on the neckline, so with 2 first loops make decrease and then knit as usual. So we have left 9 loops on the needle and then knit 14 rows up as we did before, and on the front side the last loop knit as front stitch. Then turn your work and the first loop knit as purl stitch. Don't take it off on the right needle. So in total we should have 67 rows, and at 68 we will close the knitting. I've done 67 rows and at 68 close the knitting as we did before. Here is what we should have. We're gonna put a rubber band in the middle and the back side should be knitted in the same way, but without the neckline. We make decreases only on the sides, starting from the 40th row, then in the 42nd row, 44th row, 46th row and 48th row, the last with decreases on the sides. I'll show you how to close the neckline on the back. I did 11 more rows after the decreases, and now I will knit 60th row and close the stitches on the back side. We need to knit 9 loops on the right needle, so the first one just take off on the right needle and then knit 8 more loops. So we have 9 loops on the right needle, and now we should close the knitting. So knit the first loop, then the second one, and pull the first loop through the second one, like we did before. Then knit the next loop and close it the same way. And knit until we have left 8 loops on the left needle. I have 8 loops on my left needle and 1 on my right count as 9s, and from here we need just regular front stitches. This is what we should have, and here we will again knit at first one side and then the other. We should knit 7 rows up as we did before without decreases, just row with purl stitches and row with front stitches. At row 68 we will close the knitting. From the other side, knit the same way, starting from the wrong side, and at 68 rows close the knitting. And this is what we should have. To knit a band, we need to count how many loops we need to cast on. I count straight through the rows. Then I go to the back and then back to the front. I have a total 83 loops, but I need to remove 5 loops because we will make the joint of the band like this. So I need 78 loops for the band for the neckline. On the sleeves I counted the same way. There I got a total 56 loops and cast on even number of loops to the elastic band. So cast on and knit the band in the same way as we did at the very beginning. So I made 5 rows and right now I'm closing the knitting, alternating front stitches and purl stitches. Now let's sew it all together. I will use a hook, but you can sew everything with a regular plastic needle. Put the front and back facing each other. On the shoulders, I put the hook into the first stitches. Then I grab the yarn, pull it out, and crochet 1 loop on the hook. Then I insert the hook into the same place, grab the yarn, pull it out, and crochet 2 loops on the hook. Then I insert the hook into the next stitches and make a single crochet. So crochet 2 loops on the hook. Then I insert the hook into the next stitches and make single crochet again, and so on until the end of the shoulder. If you use needle, just sew it like this. If you use hook, chain 1, cut the yarn, pull out the loop and hide the end through the stitches, but if you use needle, just hide the end through the stitches. And from the other side, make the same way. On the sides from shoulder, I count 23 rows down and put a marker. From the other side, I count the same way, and in all I have 56 rows between markers. On the sides, I will insert the hook by the edge loops. They are very big compared to others, and I'm going to crochet with slip stitches, but you can use just regular plastic needle. So I grab the yarn, pull it out, and crochet 1 loop on the hook. Then I insert the hook into the same places, grab the yarn and pull the first loop into the second one like this. Then insert the hook into the next loops. Grab the yarn and pull the first loop into the second one, and so on until the markers. At the end, chain 1, cut the yarn, pull it out, and you can hide the end through the stitches. From the other side, make the same way. Now let's sew the band. The elastic band has a wider edge and the narrower edge. We will sew on the wider one. I insert the hook into the first row from the shoulder seam and into the first stitch on the elastic band. Grab the yarn, pull it out and crochet one loop on the hook. Then I insert the hook into the same stitches and make a slip stitch. Grab the yarn, pull it out and crochet first loop into the second one. Now insert the hook into the same place on the shoulder, but into the next stitch on the band, and make a slip stitch. In one edge loop we have to make 2 stitches on the band, so I insert the hook into the next edge loop and into the next stitch on the band and make slip stitch. Then I insert the hook into the same edge loop on the shoulder but into the next loop on the band and make a slip stitch, and so on until the end of the sleeve. And at the end, I crochet 2 edges of the band together with a slip stitches. Chain 1 and cut the yarn. This is how it looks like on the front side, and make the same on the other side. To join the band to the neckline, we need to count 6 stitches from the center and put a marker there. Insert the hook into the first loop from the center and into the first loop of the band. We also join with slip stitches, but here you need to be careful. Here we have no edge loops, so we crochet 1 loop on the band and 1 loop on the neckline. The back side will be different. I made it to the back. I'm on the shoulder seam right now, and there are edge loops. So in one edge loop we crochet 2 loops on the elastic band. On the back neckline, we crochet again 1 loop into 1 because we don't have edge loops here. But on the shoulders again there will be edge loops, and there we will crochet 2 loops in 1. And on the front side of the shoulder, crochet 1 loop into 1. This is what we should have, and now we need to crochet the wall of the band. Make 2 loops in one edge loop on the band. Here we have side edge loops, and in one we should crochet 2 loops. The first, and in the same loop, the second. At the end, chain 1, cut the yarn and pull out the loop. Then I also join with slip stitches one end of the band to the top of the band. And now we need to hide all the ends. With gray yarn I make a few knots around red brooch, and then with the needle hide through the stitches. And this is our result. The width is 46 centimeters, the height is 56 centimeters. If you want, you can sew a little bow or leave it without it. And the vest turned out very warm and cozy. In this technique, you can knit any picture you like. Thank you for watching this video. I'm sure you did it well. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to add them in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and see you in the next video. Bye, kitties!